Hello guys, my name is SVB and I'm back with another video, and today I'm going to be dropping a video I know a lot of you have been asking me to drop for a while now. Those of you who have been following my channel will know that a while back I began a series called What I Learned as a GM, and it began with what I learned as a GM in Gold. This was the result of me making an alt account to play DPS and getting placed in Gold despite trying my hardest. And while I was disappointed to be officially classed as a bad DPS, playing in the lower ranks really gave me a lot of insight into common mistakes that players make and also certain issues that seem to frequently crop up among certain ranks. Today, I'll be continuing the series and following my journey through the DPS ranks with what I learned as a GM in Diamond. So without wasting any time, let's get to it guys. So, I've actually spent a lot of time in my Overwatch career in Diamond, because this was probably the rank I stalled out in for the longest before I really started to analyze my gameplay and push for the highest ranks. But this time, when I returned to Diamond with my DPS ult, the first thing that struck me was how good a lot of the players were, mechanically speaking. Even in Platinum, you will find certain DPS players who actually have fantastic aim and barely miss shots, but in Diamond, it's even more common. You'll often find Widowmakers who aim like they should be in Masters, or maybe even GM with a slight improvement, and you'll often find Anas who are really scary to come up against and barely miss a sleep dart or are able to pluck fires out the sky. And while this is impressive, it's also in equal parts damning, because really, these players should be higher. There's nothing stopping them. But after a few games, I started to figure out what it was that was keeping these players in this rank. And if I was to summarize it in one sentence, it'd be this. Diamond, in my opinion, has the worst skill to game sense ratio of any rank in the game. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I've made a graph and a bar chart to represent this visually. Obviously, I'm not saying that players in Diamond have the worst game sense of any rank, but what you will notice as you go up the ranks in Overwatch is that generally, the higher you go, the smarter the players get in terms of how they play. This is fairly obvious. You'd expect this to be the case in any game, and if you were to plot this journey on a graph, normally, you'd expect it to just be a straight line, constantly going up, like you can see with the yellow dotted line. But I think what's happening is that a significant number of players are improving in their mechanical ability from bronze to silver to gold and platinum all the way until they reach diamond. At this point, they get very good, or pretty much as good as they'll ever get, and then they stall out here because they haven't actually gotten smarter with how they play the game. In bronze, the players may not know a lot about Overwatch, or even if they do, they're not able to apply it in game, but they will likely struggle mechanically to even operate their character properly. So their biggest issue isn't game sense or tactics. In silver, players are a little bit smarter and mechanically better. They're starting to get much more of a hang of the game. The same goes in gold, where you're starting to see people progress fairly rapidly now. In platinum though, I think this starts to shift, with players getting a lot better mechanically, but slowing down how quickly they're improving in their game knowledge and their game sense. Where previously they were picking up new things very quickly, they're now starting to reach a saturation point. And I think in Diamond, this is where the trend truly flattens out. I mean, I think this is a problem that affects Masters as well, by the way, and it's only really GM where you start to see this really grow again, and people generally start to understand the game to a really high level. But sticking to Diamond, what's the end result of this graph of progression? Well, what this ends up meaning is that a lot of players hit Diamond through mechanical ability, and then they just stop progressing because they're not seeking to improve their actions and decisions in the game, or they're not seeking out external knowledge on game tactics and guides. This red zone I've highlighted here is something of a danger area. It's where a lot of people start to stagnate, I think, and not because they've reached a ceiling they can never beat, but more because they're not using all the tools at their disposal to actually jump the hurdle in front of them. They make stupid decisions, they don't play with their team, they don't counterpick, they don't change their playstyle to fit compositions. If you're someone who this applies to, well, you've already made a good start because you're here trying to find ways to improve. But it's likely that players like this aren't on YouTube looking for help. So if you know someone like this who is mechanically gifted but has seemed to stall out, encourage them to go out there and look for guides or coaching, because honestly, it's a real shame seeing players who could easily be much higher wasting their talent because of laziness or ignorance. Now of course, I myself always say that there's not just one type of player. Some people are skilled mechanically and others tactically. So I know a lot of you watching this will say, well SVB, I'm in Diamond and I'm not mechanically gifted, so why am I stalled out in this rank? Well, this brings me to my second and related point. Because, as we've just established, Diamond is relatively stunted in terms of its tactical understanding. It also follows that people lack the tools to analyze themselves well enough to fix their mistakes. If you think about it, Diamond is a really high rank when you take the big picture into context. If you're in Diamond, you're in the top 10% of the player base. In any other medium, whether that be a sport or a job or academics, if you were in the top 10% of something, that would be a phenomenal achievement on its own, provided the pool of competition is large enough, which definitely is in Overwatch. So this is not to deride anyone who's reached this point, because they should be very happy with what they've done. However, what I think is going on is that even people who are in the top 10% of the Overwatch player base don't actually understand the game to the level that you would expect the top 10% to do. At this level, normal logic would dictate that you understand the game's theory inside out. You know all the tactics, you're up to date with what's meta, what's not, and you know exactly what the counterplays are. You see a situation, you see a certain odd hero pick, you should instantly know how to respond, how to react, and very quickly be able to identify when you're doing things that could lead to a loss. But this is simply not the case in Overwatch. It's completely forgivable and understandable if you're someone who panics in game and makes wrong decisions, and it's forgivable if mechanical aim just isn't your thing. But it's not forgivable to not even understand how the game and its heroes work, because literally everyone can have access to this information. There's a million YouTube videos, there's whole subreddits, and there's Overwatch League. So many things that you can go to, so many ways to essentially have the same knowledge as the pros, or at least have a somewhat comparable understanding of how the game operates. And yet here we are, playing a game where even some of the best players don't really fundamentally understand what they should be doing. But look, I know a lot of people are lost and they just don't know how to go about identifying the patterns of play that are costing them games. They don't know how to figure out their mistakes, and they certainly don't know how to correct them, which is why at some point soon I intend to put out a video that details how you should go about self-reviewing and how to analyze your own gameplay. But the first step is actually trying, and I'm convinced that there's far too large a number of people, particularly in Diamond, who just aren't doing this. These are the kind of people who leave one game and queue straight into the next one without having learned anything at all, without having gained anything of value. And this brings me to my final point: mentality. There are very few things as important as mentality in Overwatch or any game or even any interest that you have in life. The right approach to any issue will make your life 200 times easier. Now, I know a lot of people have no interest in climbing to Master and GM and even beyond. They don't have the time, or they just don't care that much. And this is totally fine. This is a game after all, and you can play it for whatever ends you want. But if you do care, and if you are someone who wants to climb higher, then fixing your mentality is super important. Of course, I've already made a video on this topic, which you can go see, but I'll try to summarize what I mean by this. In Diamond, I've noticed a lot of people who seem overly frustrated with the game itself, and as a consequence, everyone around them. I think this goes back to what I mentioned earlier. Diamond is in many ways a rank of stagnation. People aren't necessarily getting mechanically better, and they've definitely stopped learning tactics from just passively playing the game. And even though they need to go out and seek more knowledge, or at least seek to apply knowledge to their own game, they just don't. That leaves a lot of players hovering around the same couple hundred SR, season in, season out, without ever really seeing anything change, and that is an incredibly frustrating feeling. In many ways, stagnation is even worse than regression. If you drop SR and fall to Platinum, at least you know you're doing something wrong. But sitting in the same rank, never climbing, and never understanding why you're not climbing can leave people feeling hopeless, and they end up taking it out on their teammates. People give up too quickly, they tilt each other, they refuse to play together. Things that, again, when you're in the top 10% of something, should have been left far behind. So really, my conclusion and my message to Diamond players is, don't take things for granted. It's really great that you've made it this far. You clearly have a talent for this game, but if you actually care about reaching the highest peaks of Overwatch, of pushing yourself to your own limits, then you have to work at it. That means watching videos, watching Overwatch League, reading guides, and most importantly, it means looking at your own play with an objective eye. It means learning to identify your mistakes and then actually taking steps to apply that knowledge into your games. Like I said, I will at some point try to make a video on this, but it's very easy to at least start doing it yourself. The new replay tool is an amazing resource that Blizzard has given us. Get in there and see what you can find. Pretend you're watching someone else's game and just see what mistakes you can spot. See what you're doing different to to what a pro might do, or see what you might do differently if given a second chance. Because if you put in the hard work behind the scenes, guaranteed it will pay off when you get into your next game, and your next game, and the game after that. And that's all I got for today, guys. Hope you found this video helpful. As you kind of noticed from the content of this video, in Diamond, there aren't necessarily specific mistakes that people make like they do in Gold and Platinum. It's more of an overarching problem that comes down to a multitude of factors, which I think I've gone into here. Hopefully, if the player base as a collective can get smarter with how it plays and understands the game, then every single one of us will see a better standard of Overwatch being played out in our matches. As always, I'd like to give a big shout out to my patrons, and my new top patron, Izzy Sind, who I forgot to shout out last time. And I wanted to give a final call for the limited time promotion currently running on my Patreon. I will start sending out the personalized cards to my patrons, so if you want in on the action and fancy a unique card made with nothing but love and overused marker pens, then make sure you're signed up on Patreon. But otherwise, that's it from me. I'll be back next week with another video, and I'll try and make that guide at some point on how to analyze your own games. But till then, see you guys soon.